Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Claude. Well, thanks for taking the time out of your busy tour schedule.
My pleasure. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good.
Um, yeah, it's really exciting to see that you guys are here in the UK. How was the show last night?
Great, great. We had two shows last night, and first show we got a standing ovation and encore. Second one was two encores, so I
Wow.
think the audience enjoyed it.
Yeah, recently you guys featured on a BBC documentary, Jacob Collier, which I'd never heard of him, but I'd known about you guys, and I think a lot of us were intrigued by him, but also then we were able to link back to wow, so where he got his inspiration and stuff. But did you see a different interest from the audience from that, or are these more of the audience who knew you before that documentary?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really know if there's a big correlation. Um, I think a lot of the people that were there are hardcore Take Six fans from back
Okay.
in the day. um, because Jacob Collier's fans, at least from what I've seen, a lot of them tend to be a lot younger. So we have
Okay.
a smattering of that in the crowd, but I'm not really sure that is carried over quite yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me start from the beginning. My name's Namdi. So I actually work full time for the National Health Service here in the UK as a therapist working with kids. And I started this halftime chat during the pandemic. And I think I've probably spoken to over 80 different recording artists. And one of the things that have always intrigued me by, especially the groups from um, members of Jodeci, Blackstreet, members of As Yet, Drew Hill, they always say 112 when I talk about how they got into music and their inspirations, they said, "Yeah, Take Six and Commission."
Mhm.
Those, so it was like, wow. So those are the two you, both yourself and Commission, are the so almost like the forefathers of what they thought of as when they started to have a group. So that's why it's really intriguing to be able to talk to you and understand about your group and your history. Um, but we have an international audience, so not just Britain and America, but around the world. So I always like to start off from yourself, Claude. Where were you sort of born and raised?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and
Okay.
my family was only there for a few years though when we went to Buffalo, New York. And Buffalo is where I pretty much got my foundation as far as music is concerned. My grandparents lived there. My grandfather was the director of the church choir. So
Ah,
that's where a lot of not just the musical training, but the harmonic training and seeing someone be in front of a music group. It was from those early days that I knew I wanted to do what it is I'm doing now from watching my grandfather. So between Brooklyn and Buffalo.
so your name is Claude McKnight the third. I take it that your grandfather and your father have the first and
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So were you the oldest of in your family?
Yes, I'm the oldest of four boys. So it's
Okay.
me and then my brother Fred, my brother Michael, and then my youngest brother Brian.
Okay. Okay. And but was singing part of the, was that something that you all had to do, or was it something that you just found joy in doing?
It was just the joy of it. The funny thing is, everybody in not just our immediate family, but our extended family sings or plays an instrument. So we didn't even know that that wasn't something that everybody did until we got to school and realized, oh, wait a minute, other families and other people don't do this? So we just did it because of the joy and the love of it.
And at that time, was it ever the case where the four of you, as four brothers, thinking, let's do a group like the Jacksons, or what was the was that any of an inspiration, any of those other groups?
Well, growing up, we did have a group. The four of us had a quartet.
Okay.
And at that time, because I was the oldest and had the deepest voice. I sang bass in our quartet. And my brother Brian, who, is 7 years younger than me, was kind of our little Michael Jackson. So, yeah, oh, yeah, we had a group that sang for many, many years.
Okay. And then, because I think I've seen some of the history where you sort of moved to Alabama and the university, and I actually thought you were from there. But how did you go from singing locally and in church to thinking, okay, actually I'm going to take this further?
Well, it wasn't until I got to Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama, where I decided as a freshman that I wanted to have a group. Because growing up and singing with my brothers, again, it was just something that we automatically did. And if you know anything about Oakwood, it's a school that is very, very rich in a cappella history. So there's always been quartets and trios and choirs there. So it was very easy for me to find three other freshman guys when I got there who could sing, and we started a group. I mean, within a month of being there.
Wow. But then, was there any dreams of actually going professional, or was it more, okay, I'm in university, let's just sing just because it's like an
Yeah,
athlete?
it
I
was
love.
it was yeah, it was completely a hobby at the time. We just wanted to have another group on campus. I mean, there were probably, I mean, conservative estimate, probably 20, 30, 40 other groups on campus. And we just wanted to be one of those. So we started out as a quartet.
Okay. And but when did it? So because you started as a quartet, but we all know you as Take Six. So how did that then expand?
Okay. So what happened was
Yes.
uh, I had known Mark Kibble from many years before. In fact, his father was the pastor at the church in Buffalo when I was growing up, but I hadn't seen him again until I got to college. And the true story is that my quartet was rehearsing in a bathroom on campus, and Mark Kibble came into that bathroom and added a fifth part to what we were doing, and subsequently started arranging for the group.
Oh,
From Mark's brain, he had a very extensive jazz background, and we started out with him as a quintet, and then we added another member, which just gave him even more creative freedom. And we knew once we had six people that we had happened upon something that we really, really were enjoying. So that's how it happened.
now and that's strange because I mean, when we look at history, I mean, apart from the Temptations, who were five, were there many groups that had up to six, or did you? Yeah.
You know what? I really don't know. And I don't think I've ever been asked that question. For us, it just made sense because with the kinds of arrangements that Mark started doing, we could do a lot of different things. We could have a walking bass line and then have three horn parts on top, and then, a part or two that were autonomous, or we could have six parts completely as a choral arrangement, or there were a lot of things that we could do with six people.
Wow.
It just seemed to make sense for us, but we never really thought about any other groups as far as were there any other six-man groups, any sextets? And I'm sure there are and there were, but for us, we didn't care. We didn't want four.
Yeah.
Five was a little limiting, and six just seemed to be the sweet spot for us.
Wow. I guess what's interesting is that because most in the 90s, a lot of the groups that we were used to came from the church, and they had a very soulful type of they were almost like singing worship. How did you guys gravitate to go into sort of the jazz element of things and really knowing your different voices as opposed to singing in a choir?
Well, for us, it was kind of a natural progression because we all enjoyed jazz music. We
Okay.
grew up listening to it. Some of us played it. I was a trombone player growing up, so I played in jazz bands. Um, so it was a natural thing for us. We just started arranging and singing the types of things that we grew up listening to. Um, so yeah, there was never any question for us, you know. And I think there were so many other groups that were doing straight ahead spiritual music or even barbershop style
Yeah.
quartet music that's what we started out doing, and that was fun, but we wanted to expand on that. So just became easier and something that we fell into because that's what we grew up listening to.
So I mean, just for the audience, what kinds of people were you listening to?
So for us, of course, if you ask each one of us individually, you'd have different things. But we grew up listening to the High-Lows and the Singers Unlimited, the Mills Brothers, the Manhattan Transfer, um, groups like that, as well as gospel groups. You know, we listened to the Winans, we listened to Commissioned, we listened to Andre Crouch
Oh
a
yeah.
lot. You know, the Hawkins family. So we took elements of all of those things, Earth, Wind, and Fire. You know,
Wow. I wouldn't have
so
thought.
then because we could take elements from even a lot of the instrumental music and
Mm.
put it into what we were doing. You know, and a lot of big band music growing up.
And that's interesting because when you first came out, you were known for sort of a cappella type of singing, and then you talked about playing the trombone. What happened with the instruments? How did that decision become like, well, let's actually just use our voice as our instrument as opposed to the music complementing?
So the funny thing about me kind of putting the trombone away, when I got to Oakwood, I had already known that Oakwood at the time didn't have a thriving band program,
Oh,
even though that's what I went there wanting to do. So it's by providence and by, I guess the grace of God that they didn't have a great band program because I couldn't focus on that. I knew I wanted to sing, and all of a sudden it was thrust in my face because I was like, well, can't play the trombone really anymore here. So what else am I going to do musically? So that's why I started the group. So the trombone went by the wayside.
wow. And did you study music in a way because, and I think it's different because we know people who sing in in different keys, but for what you guys do, it seems as if you almost write the music and understand. And I think jazz seems a little bit more complex to sing compared to just getting a song and just someone's playing a piano and I'm just going to sing. Did it seem as if you had to do more studying and work more on having a jazz vocal group?
So the studying part for us, and I think for any group or any artist, should be about listening as much as you can.
Okay.
I think because when you listen to a lot of things, let them equate it to this. Someone who wants to be a really good author typically reads a lot.
Yeah.
You have to immerse yourself in everything else that's going on so you can have an idea of what writing styles are like. I think it's the same thing with doing any kind of music. The more you listen to the things that are happening in that genre, I think the easier it becomes for you to pick up things and chord progressions and the way things are done, the rhythms, the intricacies of what that genre brings. And then, of course, you sprinkle in the things that are uniquely you, but you have to listen. And, because it's kind of like you are what you eat. The more you can ingest, the more you can put into your arrangements and into the style that you eventually and essentially have.
Well, so that's what sort of separated you guys from thinking about going down the sort of commercial route of okay, the sort of R&B, the pop type of songs, which
Mm.
may get more airplay and bigger paychecks, but to hone on the things that you really felt passionate about. And was there ever a mixed emotions about our audience size and the direction that we you decide to go as a group in those
The
early
funny
years?
thing for us was when we first came out, um, and we were signed to Warner Brothers Records initially, the expectations on the album, the very first album, were very, very low. And for us personally, we just wanted to do the music that we love doing. So it was a win-win for us. We were like, okay, well, we're being signed to this major record label, and we get to do the stuff that we grew up singing. So that first album sold a lot of records, and it was on our own terms. No one came in and produced us or told us we had to do different kinds of music or anything like that. So we were very blessed to be able to do exactly what it was that really lit a fire at us. And that's what we've continued to do. So, as far as commercial success and creative success, we've always had a certain amount of that. So we've been able to continue doing what it is we wanted to do. And I think that's
Yeah.
what has also essentially kept our group together for as long as it has.
Yeah. How did you leave Alabama, well, university and get some to Warner Brothers? Because that I mean, Warner Brothers were one of the big ones, and they're still big now. But back in those days, how did that happen?
So we did a showcase. We had someone in Nashville, Tennessee, which is only 2 hours from Huntsville, Alabama, where the school was, set up a showcase where they just invited all of these different record label
Wow.
heads in Nashville. And when you do a showcase, you have no clue who's going to show up. You don't know if anyone's going to show up. And in fact, there may have been 7 people there, and we were prepared. We just did what we did. And unbeknownst to us, the gentleman who was the head of Warner Brothers Nashville showed up at that showcase,
Wow.
uninvited, came in and checked us out and let us know that he enjoyed what we had just done, and he wanted to offer us a deal. We were like, okay. And one showcase, a guy who we never knew, never invited, and that's the rest is history.
Wow. I mean, so by this time, when the showcase came, were you guys prepared? Like, we want to have a career in this, so we need we know we need a record deal and stuff. Or was it just like a night and another show for you guys because that's stuff you were doing?
Well, I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, we were so young and green in this that, again, we just asked someone to set this up for us. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what could happen. So for us, it was just another show, basically. And in fact, being another show, it was a show where no one was. Like I said, there were like 7 people. So
Oh,
that's another thing that we tell young artists is like always be prepared because you never know who's going to come in the room. You know, we could have said, well, no one's really here. Let's not do this. Or no one's really here. And then just halfway done it, be like, okay, let's get this over with. But we sang our hearts out, and it allowed us to be in front of someone who really enjoyed what they heard.
wow. And I guess that's the amazing thing. So when he offered you guys the record deal, who has to go back and start studying? Okay, what does record or contract involve in? What did any of you then decide? Okay, we need to know what the business side of music and what that entails, or is it just sign here?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we had to immediately hire lawyers and actually find management at that point, because you want to have a team of people around you who are looking out for your best interest. Um, and that's the age-old story in the music business, is that you find these green artists who don't know anything, and then they sign a bad deal or whatever, and then they blame the record company.
Yeah.
And it's like, record company's not there to tell you what a good deal is or isn't. It's up to you to find a team of people who can explain it to you, who can um, get you into the business correctly and keep you there in a way that it's a good experience for you and you can actually have a career in it.
Wow. Were you fortunate to get good people around you at those?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We've always been fortunate enough to, and I think that's the other thing about having strength in numbers, within the group with 6 people, and 6 people who are not only creative, but smart. I think it's very important to surround yourself with people who are smart enough and creative enough to lift the entire organization higher.
Yeah. And it's strange because everyone I've spoken to who comes from an R&B background, they got signed to say maybe a production deal with somebody who knew all the stuff and sort of just got them green. Um, but it's very rare that they got approached by a label directly and then had the opportunity to go around and get their support. It's normally some production deal signs them and takes them to a label, and so they've not had that opportunity. So it does seem fortunate, and I do wonder because you went R&B, so more jazz, and you got signed by um, sort of I would assume the head of Warner Brothers in Nashville's more country. Was he more looking at country acts?
Yes.
Um, we don't seem to hear the same type of stories from those who are signed to pop or country acts, and I do wonder if that experience also might have been different if you compared to if you'd been signed to an MCA or an Uptown or so. Do you think that made a difference by who came to see you and what who they used to dealing with?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I think for us, because we were signed in Nashville to the Nashville division of Warner Brothers, which was the country music division,
Yeah.
it was a very different signing and a very different experience for us because, and these words came out of his mouth. He said, I love the music. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but let's figure it out together. So we weren't signed to a production company that had all the answers or that wanted to take us in a direction that they thought would be more appealing or
Yeah.
commercially viable or whatever. This guy just wanted to get the music out there. And because they didn't know what to do with it, they allowed us to do
Wow.
exactly what it is they fell in love with in the first place. And it found an audience. Now, again, if we've been signed to another label or to a production company, whatever, who knows what would have happened? I'm sure a producer would have said, hey, I think if you change these things or you don't do this or more of that or whatever, we can get you to a different place. And that would not have been authentically who our group was.
Yeah. But also they would have been able to talk about taking your publishing sign here to this and all those small nuances that most new artists aren't more aware of as
Well,
well.
again, the interesting thing was we were signed long ago enough that not only did we have autonomy in the studio, but we all had our own publishing deals. And, we had a lot of really great things that were thrust at us that we didn't even at the time know existed,
Wow.
So we had a lot of things that enabled us to financially from the very beginning be viable and not have to struggle and not have to wonder what was going to happen. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to an amazing working relationship with Warner Brothers Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really refreshing to hear your side of the story, because it's quite different from everyone else who was signed to in New York or LA, and signed by people who knew everything, but you only find out by a third album, like, oh, where's this gone and what's that, and by that time it's too late. But when I've had interviews with people who are white and sing pop or rock, they don't seem to have those same stories because they seem to be and it's not the labels as a such that are doing this. It's just the people who are approaching them. Then what's their motives? They're more like you guys have a talent, and if we nurture your talent, it'll be successful for all of us. As opposed to, I need to get as much as I can from you, until as long as you don't know. It's almost like a relationship. If you were signed to a professional sports team, they want to make sure that you get the best because the better you are, the more you can perform. And it didn't seem like that with our R&B acts. They just almost didn't have those types of um, good experiences. Um, your first album did over platinum. Did that take yourself and Warner Brothers by surprise? How successful your debut album was?
Yeah, it took everyone by surprise. I remember one of the quotes from the gentleman who signed us, Jim Ed Norman, was if we sell 25, 30,000 copies, it'll be a success.
Whoa.
Because for him, it was kind of a pet project. He
Okay.
loved the music. And again, remember, this was the country music division, and they were having a lot of success at the time. So he had a little bit more autonomy to sign
Ah,
artists that he really believed in. So I'm
wow.
sure, if we were to ask him, he probably took a little flack in signing this group that had nothing to do with country and was basically an a cappella gospel jazz group. So, to keep it a little bit under the radar with a smaller budget and smaller expectations would have been the better thing for him to do, which is what he did. So it took us all by surprise, and it enabled that division of Warner Brothers to grow leaps and bounds, because then he was able to sign all kinds of other artists and create a whole new division within the Nashville
Wow.
Warner Brothers system. So it was good for everyone.
Wow. The wow. So I mean, any idea who else got signed based on your success that would normally wouldn't
Oh,
have got?
sure. He signed Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, which are a jazz blues group.
Wow.
Out of that group came, uh, wow, what is his name? Victor Wooten,
Wow.
the amazing jazz bass player. Um, he signed the Fairfield Four, which is an older um, black gospel group.
Wow.
So there's a lot of stuff that happened because they created a whole nother division called Alliance, which was our original
Oh yeah,
name.
yeah. Did they know that?
Oh yeah, because
Okay.
we had to change our name when we got signed because another group had it
Oh,
at the time. So Warner Alliance kind of came out of that, and that's where they signed some of their other vanity projects to put over there instead of it being directly on Warner Brothers Nashville.
Nashville.
So yeah, they were able to do a lot of really cool things over the years.
Wow. I mean and that's also another feel good story about how much you not just not repaid him for trusting you, but also opened the doors for other people indirectly by your success.
Hmm.
What damn were you not did you were you nominated for your debut album any the Grammys at that point?
Yes, our debut album was nominated for 3 Grammys,
Wow.
and we won 2 of them. Yeah,
Wow.
and we performed on the show, which was really, really cool. And of those 3 Grammys, the one that we didn't win was my favorite nomination of all time, and that was for Best New Artist.
Whoa.
Because obviously you can only be nominated for Best New Artist
Once.
one time.
Who beat
Yeah.
you?
Tracy Chapman.
Oh, that's hard one because she was yeah
Hmm.
yes that she was a
Hmm.
global success with that
Oh yeah.
sidekick. Wow. No, so not only commercial success, but I guess when you and in the 80s the Grammys had a lot more significance than they are now. So that must have been almost like the head honchos of one head office thinking, what's going on here? How did this unknown group come up with not just be was going over platinum, but getting Grammys nominations? That everyone must have taken notice, and I guess it would have been would have had his star rise up as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Jim Ed Norman, who I said signed us, became kind of a Svengali in the industry, and at that time, for our next few albums, they started assigning Warner Brothers New York and Warner Brothers Burbank out in L.A. Some of the marketing chores and stuff, because they're like, well, we've got this group now, and we need to put them in the R&B categories, the pop categories, and all of that. So, and it was a good thing because that enabled for larger budgets
Okay.
and for other people who were more adept at some of the other marketing aspects to get into the fray. So it was cool. It was different
Yeah.
because we had this little family in Nashville with the Warner Brothers family. And so that was great for us. But, after having the success of that first and second album, it needed to go into a larger pool of people.
Okay. I mean, on the hindsight, do you think staying in Nashville and under that guidance would have been better, or did you think the bigger attention put a lot more pressure and expectation?
I think it's both. I think at the beginning, when you don't know much and you have all of the success, you're kind of insulated a little bit, you know, and you're able to share that success with a smaller group of people and able to work with a smaller group of people and know all of those people by name, you
Yeah.
know. And then once you start having a bigger success and they start farming it out a little bit more to more people in the company, inevitably you start having situations where it's a little bit more out of your control.
Mm.
And not that that's a good or a bad thing, it's just a different thing. I think that's what ended up happening as subsequent albums were made for us, is that we started having to have more meetings and more strategy sessions with a lot more people.
Wow.
And that's where things can get, a little off track, if I want to use that group of words.
Yeah.
Um, and people start having their own kind of agenda on what they want to see your success to be. And we still continue to do the kind of music that we wanted to do. But it was a little different from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, then how did you leave to go to Reprise? Was that who made that decision?
So Reprise is in the
Oh,
Warner
Reprise.
system.
Oh, so they
Yeah,
just
it's
changed the.
still a
Oh,
Warner.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we were with in the Warner family until the beginning of the 2000s.
Okay.
So
So
we were
when
there
it.
for a good 12, 13 years or so.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So when they put you in Reprise, was there change I mean, a different label? Did it mean different people that were managing it, or what's the change from leaving Warner to
Yeah, so what
Reprise?
happens is every few years, especially in the 90s, pretty much all of the major labels would go through an upheaval, like every 3 or 4 years or whatever. And all of
Yeah.
a sudden there would be a new person at the helm of the larger company, which would trickle
Okay.
down to the other divisions. And so that happened at Warner's quite a bit, because when we were signed, there was one regime. And then 3 or 4 years later, there was a whole nother regime and a whole nother regime. The
Yeah.
cool thing for us was being in Nashville. Jim Ed was there for the entirety of our tenure there.
Wow.
But again, because they started having us take meetings with New York and LA, we would have to talk to new regimes every couple of years. And if their philosophy was different, or musically they wanted to go in a different direction, um, then it would be a little harder trying to get them on board with what it is we were doing.
So by your third album, then when you come up with "Biggest Part of Me," and I think was that the first time you recorded with instrumentals?
No, so we did a little bit of instrumentation on the second album,
Okay.
with Where Do the Children Play and um, things like that. But to use extensive instrumentation, yeah, the Join the Band album with Biggest Part of Me was that first one.
Now that's when I sort of, because as I say, I grew up in England, went to high school in Nigeria, but moved to America in '92, and the biggest part of me was the first time I got exposed to Take Six, and when if you think of current America, for me, watching BET was how I got to learn about American stuff. But that song was all over the radio, it was everywhere. Um, Commercially, was that your most widely the biggest song, sort of on the R&B that sort of crossed over from R&B inside, or?
Yeah, I think that was probably to this day our biggest R&B hit. Is a remake from a group called Ambrosia.
Mm.
The funny thing about that song is I heard that song the first time in 1980 when I was a freshman in college. And I had always known that I loved the song. And I was like, well, one day I would love to be able to do a remake of this song. And so by 93, 94 is when we did that. And it was a pretty huge hit for us.
It was that a surprise for you how big it went and the fact that it crossed over like that?
Personally, no,
Oh,
because
okay.
it was such a great song.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that I always tell young artists. You have to find great songs first. Everything starts with the song. So it was a huge hit back in 1980. So for us, we just needed to put our spin on it and put our brand into it. And I knew that it would do something, and it was something that was enjoyed by a lot of people. So it didn't really surprise me necessarily. Um, it was eye-opening in the sense that all of a sudden Take Six could be on the radio, um, with some kind of consistency. Because before that, you couldn't really program of an a cappella song in the midst of other R&B songs or
Yeah.
even jazz songs that are instrumentation.
Yeah. I mean, but I know you did well with your Christmas albums, and I think those types of your a cappella around Christmas and stuff kind of work well. And I'm sure during the programming and that time. Did you ever catch the ear of Quincy Jones in those early days and Herbie Hancock and those guys?
Oh yeah, we knew all of them, like even before our first album came out.
Oh, how
Uh,
come?
Quincy was a friend of ours, and actually, right before our first album came out, we did another showcase in LA that Quincy hosted for us. You
Oh,
know, so we've known him since the very beginning of our career. Um, People like Herbie Hancock, um, we knew of and ended up working with on Join the Band. You know, he's on that album.
yeah.
So if you ever look at the liner notes, which I think were still a thing back then, we had so many of the luminaries on that album, and that album cost a lot of money to
That's
make.
well, I mean, you had a big singer that led it off that really did make it show that yeah, we did it. But and I do wonder then, what was your best experience when you think about your early albums? Would it be Join the Band or would it be Take Six? When you look at both albums,
Wow, our best experience. I think they were just all different experiences,
yeah.
you know, because the very first album, we were singing songs that we had sung in college for years. So we basically went in the studio and just recorded all the songs we knew. And we wrote two songs, and those ended up being on the album. It was this brand new experience for us. I mean, we had all recorded a bit before, but never to the extent that we had done for that album. So that was one experience. And then, you know, we did the next album, which was um, wow, what was the next album? So
So
much to
much to
say.
say. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that was a whole different experience because now we were seasoned veterans, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
But there was a lot of expectation with that album because we had had all the success with the first one.
yeah.
So I think that album was a little tougher to do because now we're trying to follow that up. And I always say that it's really tough
The
to
funniest.
have a sophomore project do well. And
Yeah,
then that one did very well. Um, and then we did our Christmas album, and that was fun. That was a lot of fun because um, Christmas songs are just so cool to
yeah,
record,
yeah. They
you
are.
know. So we had a lot of fun in the studio, and then joined the band. And I think joining the band was great because we almost had this unlimited budget, and we had Stevie Wonder on the album, we had Ray Charles on the album,
Boy, yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
had, you know, all these other people. So it was just like this smorgasbord of anything we wanted to do. So I think
Wow.
that album was kind of this crowning achievement in our career, excuse me, where we were able to do any and everything we wanted to do all on one project.
Yeah, I did have the album. It's been a while, and I think I that song. And the big thing, Donny would say, "Oh, this is Take Six are normally an a cappella." So they made a big deal of the fact that you guys are using more instruments on a song than before. So that sort of took us like, wow, that can you imagine what they are like without song? So that's have everyone go back and look at your
Mm.
catalog. I think one of the biggest questions most of us would always ask, especially 96 when Brian comes out, is like, oh, how come he didn't join Take Six? Because that we connected that, oh, he was your younger brother, and we thought, oh, how come he wasn't part of the group? It's almost like, how come Randy didn't join the Jackson Five? But was there any thought about your three younger brothers who you sang with, thinking about, I wish they could have been part of Take Six in those early days? Or
So initially, when we were uh, at Oakwood University, my brother Fred did sing in the group.
oh,
So he was in the group when we were a quintet for a while, um, even when we were a sextet for a minute. So a lot of people don't realize that because it was a school in college, you know, guys would leave for the next semester or whatever, and we would replace them with other guys. And that's what happened with my brother Freddie. Is he left school and went back home, and then we put someone in the place of where he was singing. Because again, it was just a hobby, so it wasn't
okay,
like
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
professional group where we were, you know, hiring people to come in and out. And as far as Brian is concerned, remember now he's 7 years younger than me.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
as we were doing what we were doing, he was still pretty much a kid. And
Mm.
Brian's always been a solo artist. So that's something that he's always thrived in. And we even talked about it, he and I, at one point about the fact that he was like, yeah, he could never really be in a group. And I understand that. You have to have a very different kind of personality and temperament to be part of a group.
Yeah, yeah, yes. I mean, it's one thing to deal with a group of four, but then a group of six, and the personalities and the directions and and things. How do you guys then
Hmm.
manage the creativity? Creative there's a division of labor kind of thing. It's someone like, okay, you're responsible for finding our songs, you're responsible for production, or how does it work in a group of six?
Well, the way it should work and the way it does work in our group is you try to find what the strengths and the weaknesses are of each person, and then you delegate the responsibilities to each person to make those things work. And I think underneath it all, the only way a group can work is if there's some kind of respect for each member, regardless of what they're bringing to the party. Because what ends up happening, why a lot of groups break up or why a lot of groups don't like each other, is because there will be some underlying problem or problems that never get resolved, or that there's some kind of disrespect or things that are happening to where one member feels that they're not only better but more important, or has all of the responsibilities or whatever. And then because there is a disproportionate balance going on, it really can wreak havoc on harmony within a group. And for us, I think we learned early on that there isn't any member who's more important than the other, you know? And one person's success is everyone's success. And so that's what's really helped us.
But what do you attribute that to? Because a lot of groups who have broken up I've spoken to, it's either somebody got more the credit for producing or for writing and or made more money because they had the publishing, or they felt that they weren't heard. But how did you guys? What do you attribute the success of the fact that you could keep the core of you together and work on those differences?
Well, I attribute it to the fact that we like each other. We
Okay.
do. And we make sure that everybody shares equally in the successes.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not an easy thing to do because, just case in point, Mark does most of the arrangements, So by any measure, you could say that Mark deserves more money or he deserves more accolades or whatever.
Yeah.
And it is true that sometimes he will have more accolades or more, in fact, he has one more Grammy than us. You know what I mean? So, um, but we don't single any of those things out to make any one person get a bigger head or, psychologically feel like they are the leader or someone who should be showered with more praise or whatever. And I think, I mean, as I think about it, as I'm answering this, I think it is really a testament to each person's maturity level.
Mm.
I think that's what's important, because we could have an imbalance of power. Um, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing if everybody's mature enough to understand what is really going on and what is important. And for us, it's always been important that this is a bigger thing than just us being a singing group.
Yeah.
We've always looked at it as a ministry of sorts
Yeah.
and of something that we have been blessed to be entrusted with as far as our talents are concerned. So that's what the driving force is for us.
I was a big fan of VH1's Behind the Music, and when I listened to Bono talk about in U2, the group U2, that one of the things that they recognized that they were four members plus their manager who made the group, and that even though he might be the person everyone might know, that everything was written and produced by U2, even though he might have wrote it on the edge, but they shared everything so equally that there wasn't it eliminated a lot of that strife. So everyone could be happy to let Bono do what he's doing, but when it comes to U2, it's the same. And Chris Martin said the same thing with Coldplay. Everything's written and produced by Coldplay, even though he might write all the songs. but in a way they were able to celebrate, and that didn't seem to follow through with a lot of our R&B or black artists. It felt as if everyone wanted to get themselves out there, and so hearing what you're saying and how you're being successful and as a unit for all these years, it kind of seems that some things that other younger groups could listen and learn from.
Yeah, yeah. And even as I'm hearing you say that about the couple of groups that you've mentioned, that model of sharing equally is a very rare model. So
Okay.
let's start there.
Okay.
Um, that's not the way it's done typically. You know, that's not the way it was done with the Beatles. That's not the
Yeah,
way it was
yeah,
done with Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's not the way, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
typically, the rewards go to the people who do the most work, you
yeah,
know, and that's an okay thing. So, but I think what has to happen is you have to find a model that works for your group. And I think, again, there has to be some kind of respect underneath all of it. You can't treat the person who doesn't write at all like they are less creative or less important than the person who's writing all of the songs.
yeah,
You know, that's just not going to work, because human nature is going to show you that at some point there's going to be that imbalance to where it's going to manifest itself in ways that can be very detrimental to the group, you know? So there has to be something that makes sense. That might be my next interview.
okay, okay. No, well, I just as we wrap up, just wanted to find out how much your how faith has an impact, has played a role in supporting your group.
Well, let's see if we can hold on a second,
Okay.
because it will stop at some point.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's over by the bed. It's not here
Okay,
on the
that's fine.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, they're probably
Okay.
going to call back. But
Yeah.
faith, to answer that question, faith is the foundational core of what this group is about. Um, Again, it's always been viewed as a ministry for us. And so that's what it continues to be. And I think that that's what has kept us together as far as glue is concerned as well, because Take Six was founded on it. So we've never left that.
Okay. So as I leave, I always ask my guests one question. It's like if what is your sort of all-time favorite movie? If you were stuck in an elevator and you're like, this is my film that I just love to watch.
For me, The Usual Suspects,
Okay. Okay.
favorite movie of all time, 1995, Kaiser Soze.
That's a Sozak. Okay. Okay.
Yes,
And then what about song? What's your favorite song? Not the Take Six song, but a song that's
my favorite song, That's the Way of the World from Earth, Wind, and Fire. I can listen to that every day, all day long.
wow. Yeah, that's I mean yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful group, Ruth, beautiful choices. Claude, it's been great. I know that you guys in the middle of your tours, you've got other things done, but it was really good to hear your story, and I think a lot of what you've said has been really inspirational for some of the young artists who are coming, and that's part of what we always like to do is leave something for others to follow through with and stuff. But yeah, hopefully, I mean, I'm almost an hour and a
Well,
half
thank you
outside
so
of
much.
London.
I had a great time.
Yes, I appreciate it, and yeah, hopefully, yeah, I think people would love to continue to see and celebrate Take Six, and yeah, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
All right, take care.
Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of the Halftime Chat community. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. But most importantly, why don't you consider being a member? That's a way of supporting the channel, but also getting a lot of videos ahead of time, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and some exclusive content that doesn't get shared. But anyway, thanks for watching and thanks for being part of Halftime Chat.
I begin to